Hi, this is Forecast Year reporting in about the situation in the Middle East and what are the likely outcomes of this tragedy that we see unfolding before us in the Israel-Gaza Strip areas. Obviously, you're familiar with many of the background information. There's been escalating violence, a variety of altercations. Some kids were kidnapped and killed. There was a settlement in the West Bank area. These are controversial settlements, and many people feel that the land is being encroached upon incrementally. There's been an increase in rocket fire from Gaza Strip into the Israeli areas. This is obviously threatening Israel and the Israeli citizens. Israel's then gone in on airstrikes, and they quite a few people have been hurt in these. There's growing protests about these as the death toll is rising from these airstrikes in Gaza Strip. And so what we see in the near-term future and the longer term on this conflict is that basically there's a window for peace in the next few days. It's July 22nd currently, and Kerry has gone over to Cairo to try to work a peace deal again. Basically, the window for peace is kind of this week. Hopefully that'll happen, and they'll get peace here, some sort of a meaningful ceasefire that'll take place. The reason this thing could escalate likely if we don't get this is that many people actually are in Ramadan right now, fasting and praying. A lot of the high-level Muslim people are actually over in Mecca for this event. It is very likely that after Ramadan concludes and Eid occurs, the conclusion of Ramadan, that at that point there's going to be some soul searching, and also additional people and resources will be from the Muslim or Palestinian side will be then re-engaged in this situation, and in that point things could escalate dramatically. Basically, once those people have concluded their requirement to do their fasting and praying for Ramadan. Basically, that's taking. There's a religious requirement for them to be praying and whatnot for Ramadan. So anyhow, that being the case, we think there's a critical moment for peace and a ceasefire right now. Should the situation escalate dramatically at different, historically, when we look at other wars about the death toll, that before it has a major impact on a society economically and also on their military's ability to fight. If we compare countries that have been in horrific tragedies, and if you compare their population, Israel's population like 7 million, you compare that to other similar sized population countries and what they lost in major wars, the numbers, if the current trends continue, as far as soldiers, Israel's starting to lose about 10 soldiers a day now in the last couple of days, is the rate of human suffering and death and loss. If those trends continue, and especially if they increase at the end of Ramadan, should there be an escalation as more of the resources are likely to go into Gaza and Palestine at that time, as those groups get more organized and ramp up, likely we could see a major increase. For that reason, for those historical parallels, we think between 1,000 and 10,000 lost soldiers would be a significant amount in this situation. And again, they're losing about 10 a day, which means they can only go about 100 days or less before they get to those numbers. That's very close by, actually. Again, if it was to increase to, say, the loss of 20 or 30 soldiers a day, we'd be very closely in those numbers before the end of summer, and where we were between having lost 1 to 10,000 soldiers. So these are countries like similar populations: Norway, New Zealand, Albania, Luxembourg. That's kind of on parallel what they lost in World War II. In the Yom Kippur War, which is another parallel we might look at in '73, Israeli loss of life on their side was 2,500 to 2,800 dead. Okay, so that's in that milieu of numbers we're estimating, where there's going to have to be some real soul searching going on, and so we can easily get to that 1,000 to 10,000 type number threshold that's kind of on the horizon should this thing drag out for even a couple weeks. So this is quite a serious matter. That's another turn of events that could occur is whether, again, after Ramadan, and keep an eye on what happens next week. That'd be the going into the month of August, basically. Keep an eye on what happens there, especially in the next few days after Ramadan, if they get organized. And, for example, if a boat were to come over, if they were able to break the Israeli blockade, Israel's got a blockade right now pretty much on Gaza, and only limited supplies can really get in through a variety of channels. So should any of those things break, and again, they're in a de facto, almost a war, really. You know, some historical parallels, like when the Grandma boat came from Mexico to Cuba. That was, you know, Fidel and his team were on this boat, and they were able to dig in with their fighters against the Mexican military and head out to the hills and make a significant. That was the beginning of the Cuban Revolution, basically. What I'm saying is that a blockade, breaking the blockade of any sort, whether it's by boats and major supplies running into Gaza, especially military type supplies, that, or if you have that situation, or if you have the situation where some trucks get through, maybe from Egypt over to Gaza, especially with major military supplies, that's going to be a game changer. So watch out for those events. That's one outcome here is basically on timing, the end of Ramadan. Watch for that. That's going to be a game changer. Or if the death toll, especially on the Israeli side, kicks up significantly, it would significantly impact their military and also their will to fight. They're going to force them to do some. The war become much more unpopular at home, and so those were definitely critical things to watch for. Obviously, peace. Hopefully, peace will come about. But we see this week as really the vital peace window. If other than that, the window really begins to close, unfortunately. Another thing we need to watch out for, in addition to the death toll numbers, which would likely lead to certain events then unfolding, are other types of things that could escalate. Long term, if this thing protracts out long term, and if we see what's called a super spike in oil, and this is further out, this is probably 1 to 6 years out, but a super spike in oil prices basically occurs when there's a plunge in the annual production numbers. At that time, we could see major instability in the Middle East for a variety of other reasons, and that could ripple effect across the Middle East. But again, that's known as the super spike in peak oil, and that's when the oil prices drop. We believe that that'll be a significant event and kind of a turning point or a tipping point in the Middle East, if you will. Be sure to check out our website where we post forecasts about forecast year, watching trends in critical events, and providing historical precedent on some of these events that have occurred and why we believe certain things are likely to occur in a variety of time frames. So that's an important resource. We also provide contextual analysis, and when our forecasts recently have been correct. So you can watch on some of them. They're not all correct. Some of them are wrong. It's not easy to do forecasting, but basically we extrapolate out current trends and basically make projections based on where they're headed, based on where they are now, and also look for historical parallels that are similar to try to extrapolate where things are going to go. Thanks so much for watching this important update about what's happening in the Middle East and Gaza. And again, we hope that there will be peace this week, but should there not be, watch for a significant escalation in the near future. Thanks so much.